Hello everyone, this is part 37 of What If Naruto was in Anbu at 6, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Gaara pushed the doors to his office wide open with a grunt, marching resolutely around the desk. Baki, who had once again assumed stewardship of Suna in the Kazekige's absence, stood off to the side, watching as several others followed Gaara into the office, including the man Baki recognized as the Kazekige, Anbu Captain Daisuke, a woman with soft brown hair he did not recognize, and Kankuro. The puppeteer's former sensei almost shouted, marching forward, completely breaking office etiquette and protocol, proceeding to hug the younger male in the wheelchair. Hey sensei, getting some gray hairs in my absence I see. Smiling, he pulled away before quickly shooting back his reply. More like getting some peace. Glad you're alive, kid. Ahem. Came Gaara's stiff interruption, making Baki remember just where he was. With a somewhat embarrassed face, the Junin turned back to face the Jinchuriki. Ah, forgive me, Kazekige-sama. I forget myself. That you do, Gaara stated stiffly before turning his eyes to the Anbu commander. Daisuke, gather every available Anbu member and Junin fit for combat. I don't care if they're ours or from Kumo. You are to gather at least 24 squads and will keep heavy watch over our northern border. Kankuro, gather our puppeteer squads. I want these men ready in ambush positions around every watering location and oasis in the desert. If they somehow slip past Daisuke, they'll rot in the desert from thirst. Baki, gather Chunin and Genin, and direct the medical aid for the caravans of refugees that have just arrived with us. Commandeer one of the residential buildings for a hospital if you have to. At the last order, Zhu Liang looked to Yue Ying. Go and help in the process, Ying. The Kumo Kunoiki gave a brief, short nod before she turned away and began following the others out of the office, leaving Gaara and Zhu Liang alone. My. The sleeping dragon began slowly with a lazy drawl, a smirk tugging at his lips. You take charge rather quickly, don't you, Kazekige Dono? Gaara blinked, curiosity showing in his eyes. You disagree with the orders? Not at all. Zhu Liang responded with a slow nod, the smirk still tugging the corner of his mouth. I am merely admiring how quickly you took charge and adapted to the situation. You obviously thought very hard over what you would do once you arrived. Your village elders chose well when they elected you their Kage. One question though, Kazekige Dono. Zhu Liang allowed a brief lull in the conversation, allowing his previous words to sink in before continuing. The truth is, that this is the last place where any who may seek to escape Konoha's reach may come. If they do come, what will you do? Turn them away, or welcome them? The borderlands between Konoha and Suna will be no man's land, Gaara responded without hesitation. Those people, if we turn them away, will be K for the defection. I will not condone the S of innocence by my forces, even indirectly. They will be allowed passage into Suna. That is dangerous, Zhu Liang stated, a warning, dangerous edge to his voice as he made his way to the balcony at the office's side. Very dangerous indeed. Konoha could slip spies or forces within the caravans, even with screening teams checking for chakra levels, weapons, or anything even remotely suspicious. Some will get through. Just the same as I did not let your people be S within your village walls. I won't let those people be K if they seek refuge from Konoha. Then you endanger us all. Even with 10 detection squads screening the. Then use 20, Gaara interrupted the Reikage, allowing a thick, tense silence to descend on him before Gaara broke it, speaking in a firm, sure, however placating tone. I know this decision doesn't particularly thrill you, Zhu Liang. If you wish, you may personally assign the screening squads and either punishments against any we may find that try to infiltrate. And if you wish to take it even further, you may also assign the village guard over our key security areas. Either way, these people will be offered sanctuary within my country. Zhu Liang stood a little straighter, gaze fixed upon the Kazekige, with an intensity most would have cringed back from as if burnt. It seemed as though he was searching for something within the younger redhead. Finally the silence was broken before Liang bowed once. As you wish, Kazekige Dono. Before he turned around and made his way out of the office, the movement hiding the small, satisfied smile that spread over his features as he left the younger male to his paperwork, the cogs in his mind turning, slowly but surely. His heart and body may be failing him, but his mind remained. After all, he was still Kumo's sleeping dragon. X. On one of Kiri's islands. Yes, Jiraiya-sama. The Chunin messenger answered amidst his heavy breathing. It was one of his snake summons that delivered the message to Lady Suzume in Konoha. She sent me here to tell you. Jiraiya nodded. You did well, kid, I'll handle it. Tomorrow you can start making your way back to Konoha. The man bowed his head in thanks as he focused on calming his breathing. He'd run as fast as he could to get here. The normally 3-day run between Konoha and Wave had been a slow and arduous one, delayed by heavy rains that had turned the soft earth into a quagmire and the high trees into a slip-and-slide death game. And so on the last day, when the sky was relatively clear, to say he'd made a mad dash to the finish line was a massive understatement. Jiraiya turned to one of the few Junin that had remained with him in Wave, overseeing the final exodus back to their village now that the last of their wounded and their supplies had left. Find a ship and a crew that'll set sail by tomorrow morning. I don't care what you have to do to get it. The Junin nodded before he vanished in a cloud of smoke, leaving Jiraiya with the Chunin messenger. Turning back to the younger male, the Toad Sannin spoke up again. Anyway, other than that, I wanna know, what news of Kakashi's assault on Kumo? Though the question was offered in something of a simple, conversationalist tone, even Jiraiya couldn't really hide his anticipation over the answer. If Konoha had lost that fight, he wasn't sure if they could hold the empire together after such a defeat, let alone recover and win the war. The Chunin paused for a moment, taking a second or so to think of his answer. Well, Kakashi and the regiment he led hadn't arrived in Konoha yet, so details are sketchy, sir, but from what I heard just before I left, Kumo has fallen to us, sir. Jiraiya released a breath he hadn't even really known he'd been holding as he absently nodded. Good. Looking to the Chunin again, the Toad Sannin spoke. Thanks, kid, you can go now. The Toad Sannin turned to leave when he heard a slight intake of breath, as though the younger man was going to say something before he reconsidered. Pausing mid-step, the white-haired legend looked at the Chunin over his shoulder. You got something to say, kid? Ah, the Chunin began, hesitating as he averted his eyes. Well, come on, kid, out with it. Jiraiya stated quickly, losing his patience as the young man stammered out his hesitance. Opening his mouth, the man hesitated for a moment before he blurted out his question. What's he like? The incredulity on Jiraiya's face was absolutely priceless. What's he like? What the hell are you talking about, kid? I don't swing like that. If Jiraiya's expression was priceless, the young Chunin's expression was downright comical. What? Wait, no, you got it wrong, I mean. Hokage-sama. What is he like? Jiraiya raised an eyebrow, eyes narrowing minutely. How old are you, kid? 17, I'll be 18 in 7 months. The Chunin answered. 17, that was 5 years too young to have been a ninja when Naruto took control of Konoha, and 3 years too young to have ever met him in a mission briefing. Unlike Sarutobi, Naruto did not attend or brief personally any missions below B rank. As his territory expanded, so too did the administrative staff, allowing Naruto to handle only the highest priority assignments and delegations. Most likely, this kid had never even glimpsed at the man he now served. After a few moments of silence, the Chunin grew somewhat nervous, shuffling from foot to foot. I mean, I've heard stories and such, hell who hasn't, but, you know. I mean, you've spoken with him personally. You're probably one of the people that can tell me something that isn't an overly exaggerated rumor or something. Jiraiya let out a small huff, a bittersweet smirk crossing his lips. Kid, believe me, those rumors. Probably understatements, he stated before turning on his heel, leaving the rather small room he had adopted as his temporary office while in Wave, heading off to complete his preparations to leave in search for Konoha's currently stranded commander. Akina stuffed what little provisions and weapons she'd managed to pilfer from the local marketplace during her somewhat regular visits to the location under her advanced henge, including small bags of rice, kitchen and common hunting knives, and finally a change of clothing. The rice she could make easily with the small pot she had, though since it provided no protein her energy would begin to suffer, a dangerous fact considering that she had to make it into the desert. So hunting some animals or getting her hands on some fish was a must while she traveled. The knives she had were crude, blunt things, not nearly as durable, sharp or as aerodynamic as kunai knives. She'd probably be able to use them to K some animal, but if she was discovered by a hunter nin or even chunin that may recognize her, it won't be a very good melee outcome. She'd have to rely on jutsu and taijutsu. But the clothes were the worst thing. In Kumo, and especially later in Suna, her clothes were interwoven with very light chainmail, allowing her to resist S of kunai and or swords. The spider weave silk it was made from breathed easily and allowed her to move with great flexibility, unobstructed. The civilian clothing she wore now, however, was thick, bursome, and was generally made for civilians. Unless you were a ninja, you really wouldn't notice the difference, but to someone of her rank, it felt like she was wearing an iron suit. Wave had no ninja stores either. She had gathered from asking around a bit, that apparently, all ninja equipment sold was primarily in the 3 largest villages under Konoha's custody: Kiri, Konoha itself, and Iwa, and was monitored heavily, requiring special permits and security pass codes to access greater quality equipment. It was one of the things Naruto guarded heavily, possibly to deter deserters. Gone were the days where every town had rudimentary ninja equipment. Gone was the time that anyone could buy a kunai or a weapon with chakra channeling capability. He wanted you in his army, or to join his enemies so he could K you then. Speaking of enemies, vague whispers had begun dotting the market of Wave. Kumo fell. She wasn't sure if it was true, or just hopeful dreams of a people sick of the war. But, if it was true, then that meant Suna was next, making her need to get to her new home all the more imperative. Suna, if Gaara chose to fight, would need every man, woman, and child able to even use a rudimentary knowledge of the ninja arts. The door to her room opened with a click, bringing her attention to Tsunami as the older woman's eyes found the bag. Oh, you're leaving? Akina nodded. Yes, I'm found a way to sneak past the bridge patrols. The dark-haired woman finished for her. At Akina's silence, Tsunami entered the room a little more, stepping up close to the blonde. I wasn't sure when you first arrived, but it became clearer and clearer as time went on. You're a ninja. And, you're a ninja, that is an enemy of Konoha. Akina paused, taking a moment to think before her lips pursed. Well, you wouldn't have come here if you were gonna turn me in. So, if you've known, why have you been helping me all this time? If I was discovered here, we would be tried as traitors or conspirators. Tsunami finished sitting down on the bed. But, while Konoha's cage may have helped us be rid of Gatu, the truth of the matter is. Quote. She paused, taking a breath. That we have merely traded one dictator for another. While not as oppressive as Gatu, he's taken control of the bridge, and the docks. We are merely a giant port and nearly 35% of our money goes to his tax, while our trade is sea-off from any territories Konoha may deem hostile. The pirates he hired and brought here to make port, 3 meters, and 7 other individuals in the hospitals with injuries. Yet not one of those pirates were arrested or even questioned. We're expendable to him. Pausing for a moment, the older woman turned her gaze to look at the blonde, giving her full attention. Unlike you, dear, we do not have the strength to fight him. And we get no political points for being the only port in the eastern shore he controls. Because we do not have the ability to fight him for it. So, the reason you helped me is because this is the only way we know how to fight back. Akina didn't know what to say to that, pausing before she finished stuffing everything into the bag. Hefting it over her shoulder before she bowed to the woman who remained sitting on the bed. Thank you, for everything. Before she turned on her heel and left, closing the door behind her. Leaving the lifelong Wave civilian alone in her home. Temari's eyes trailed across the darkened cave, the biting chill of the night making her shiver despite herself. Since the night that she had seen the rain moment, as she'd taken to calling it, the Sabaku's mind had refused to let the cogs stop turning in her own mind. Sleep was a difficult, fitful thing that she barely reached on the best of nights, and downright impossible on the worst. You see, the problem with this rain episode changed virtually everything about him. Because if he had some kind of humanity, some kind of emotion, then he wasn't just some mindless K-machine bent on world conquest anymore. Some inhuman monstrosity that knew only battle and the ability to take a life, and other doubts began to surface in her mind. But one particularly stood out to her. One above all the others, and it had happened so long ago she had nearly forgotten about it. The attack on Konoha during the Chunin exam a decade ago. He had spared them. Both Gaara and herself. He'd let them go. He'd let both of them go. When they were clearly the enemy, when his village was still under attack, when them, at that point, more than any other was at its most justified. The fact that he didn't do it showed one of two things: either he was foolish, or he'd shown him mercy. Either one meant that he wasn't always the omnipotent monster he was today. That meant that he was human at one point. A part of her tried to once again reassure her hostility, saying that what he was before doesn't change or affect who he is now, but this part of her was hollow, the words having lost their conviction that had spoken them once before so strongly to the Hyuga who lay now in the cave. She had felt that they were simply Hinata's way of deluding herself. To convince herself that serving a man this uncaring, this inhuman was justified. Lies she and others like her fed themselves in order to avoid facing the ugly truth that they were simply cowards who were under the boot heel of a monster and were too weak to pull themselves out of it. Now she wasn't so sure. The Sabaku sighed tiredly, rubbing her eyes and face before she rested her cheek against her open palm. Why does everything seem so complicated? A sound to her right brought her attention to Naruto, laying asleep within the niche of rocky stalagmites he'd taken for himself. The space between the rock formations making it seem like a cage of some sort. Had he chosen that to further alienate himself from others, even if the act was an unconscious one, it was still disturbing in a way. Either way, she could still see his face, at least, the part that wasn't covered by his mask, through the gaps in the stalagmites. His eyes were scrunched up as if in pain, a cold sweat glistening his forehead as his head thrashed left and right. He was dreaming or having some nightmare. A growl, lower than his normal one, still tore itself from his tea, and she had to wonder if the man couldn't escape battle even in his dreams. Why? The cage growled through his mask, his voice, altered as it was only barely reached her at the distance between herself and him, but she could still hear it. Channeling a little more chakra to her ears, the Sabaku hoped to catch more of what was going on in his dream. Apparently even he couldn't control his subconscious. After several more seconds of his insistent thrashing, the Sabaku was just about ready to go and wake him up, under the belief that no more information was forthcoming. But before she stood up or even moved to do so, his voice again reached her ears, and this time, it rose many more questions. Tell me why, Yoshino. I don't understand. From what I know of human metabolism and poisons, it should have already been broken down after so much time. Temari's worry reached her voice clearly, eyes taking in Hinata's pale, sweat-soaked form as she lay on the floor. Her moments of consciousness had been becoming less and less frequent of late, until, for nearly 3 days or so, she hadn't woken up at all. Between herself and Naruto, they'd had to bathe her, feed her, and maintain her with what little they could in this state. It was a grueling process, and one that was unfortunately, seemingly fruitless. It may have already been metabolized. Naruto answered, placing the feather blanket over her, having finally enough of the local birds to put together the new barrier against the cold, finally being able to remove his red hood and cloak from atop her. Her body is now simply too weak to fight the sickness that afflicts her now. Temari nodded. It made sense, and if that were the case, it increased her chances of survival by a lot. Though dangerous, it was much easier to survive a fever than a poison actively attacking your immune system. That didn't mean she was out of the woods, far from it. Her temperature was through the roof, she could already suffer brain damage, and if it went any higher she could become a vegetable. It was frustrating to her, being caught in this situation where all her skills as a ninja was utterly worthless. But even though the Sabaku felt frustrated, it paled in comparison to Naruto's own agitation. He was angry, a seething anger that seeped into his bones and unto his F's. He was no stranger to the emotion, but before it was focused, it held a purpose, a function. Here it did not, a completely irrational sentiment that would do nothing for him in this situation. It certainly would not give him an infused knowledge of medical arts. As much as he tried to suppress the feeling, though, to discard it, even to ignore it, every glance towards the deathly pale Hyuga sent the familiar burning red into his eyes, and the anger returned with startling ease. He wasn't sure why, but something about Hinata, a woman he had fought beside for a decade, strong, confident, and sure in her convictions. To be laying there like some weak, shriveled husk of her former self. It was utterly disgusting. He stood, taking hold of the red shroud which had previously shielded his former teammate's weak form from the biting cold. He marched out of the cave, leaving Hinata alone with Temari as the Sabaku stoked the fire within. Yoshihiro Shimazu. My, isn't this a surprise? Though Kakashi's tone was nonchalant, his expression was anything but sharp brown eye watching as the cage from Iwa and his nephew marched into the command tent he currently resided in. His memory wasn't so faulty that he did not remember the former Tsuchikage's near-successful run against him and Guan. It also appeared as though his nephew Toyohisa remembered the, until recent, status quo as enemies, judging by how his fingers tightened around his spear as his eyes fixed themselves on the copy ninja. Tayuya, who stood at his side, openly glared at the younger Iwa nin, eyes narrowed in something akin to suspicion. Ironically enough, the one person that didn't seem at all angry, suspicious, or tense in this situation was the former Tsuchikage himself, easily pulling out a seat and propping his legs on a nearby table while allowing his warhammer to fall onto the ground. Hitaki Kakashi. The large senior greeted with a nod and a ready smirk. I suppose the rumors are true then. Depends what rumors you're talking about. Kakashi said calmly, with a slow incline of his head. Kumo's been beaten. The Shimazu said as though it were obvious. Most of your men aren't injured, and they're not dragging their feet around like a bunch of beaten dogs. You succeeded, didn't you? You got the job done. Despite himself, Kakashi smiled. Oh yeah. Kumo is a pile of rubble now. No way they can muster any kind of considerable manpower for the next 10 years. Yoshihiro smirked. Good. Though, one thing. On my way in here I noticed very few prisoners. I noticed some, but not many. The fact that I noticed some indicates that you did take prisoners, but for a major village like Kumo there should be a lot more. Care to elaborate? Kakashi sighed, his smile dimming. That's the only sour note. Mid-battle the forces you all fought at sea arrived, and most managed to escape onto the ships. No doubt heading for Suna now. It's safe to assume that the pirate navy was destroyed then. Yoshihiro nodded. Yay. We arrived in Wave a week and a half ago, shipping out the wounded and supplies before me and my boys left about 4 days ago to head back to Iwa. Kakashi nodded. He had expected that. Though for a normal ninja team getting from Konoha to Kumo took about a week, the sheer size of their host, the fact that they were carrying prisoners, as well as the spoils of their conquest slowed them considerably. As it was, they were about 3 days' march from Konoha at the current pace. Yoshihiro's smile faded for a second though. Got some bad news though. In the naval battle, the big guy in red went missing. Big guy in, you mean Naruto? Kakashi questioned with a raise of his eyebrow. A tenor in his voice that wasn't completely masked. Yoshihiro nodded once. Yes, the copy ninja's eye narrowed. The cogs in his mind turning and locking into place as he contemplated the ramifications of not being able to find the conqueror soon. It was then that Yoshihiro's eyes caught sight of a familiar set of armor and sword at the end of the tent. Standing up, the Tsuchikage's eyes narrowed as he marched over to the assorted pieces of metal. This armor. It's that Ginchiko girl's, right? Kakashi stood, marching next to the Tsuchikage with a nod. Yes, we also found Mika's body nearby. It appears they both fighting against other ninja near the coast. Yoshihiro looked to the copy ninja, head shaking. No, they were fighting each other. Kakashi started, single visible eye now wide open in curiosity. Tayuya and Toyohisa not too far behind. What do you mean? In the battle, Mika betrayed us. When Naruto was negotiating Suna's surrender in exchange for the Kazekage's sister. She's our bargaining chip, threw her overboard, and then attacked the others before making her escape on a water dragon. They most likely fought and killed each other. Kakashi shook his head. That can't be. Yoshihiro rolled his eyes. Oh please copycat. Surely you're not so naive as to believe your union is infallible. Ninjas betray its part. No, you don't understand. Kakashi interrupted with a shake of his head. The damage around the battlefield was caused by high-level water jutsu. So, they're both Kiri-nin, aren't they? Ginchiko was a lightning element, and Mika, from what I've seen, is an and stealth specialist. She uses precision strikes, not high-level destruction techniques. A heavy silence descended over the four in the room. It was Tayuya that spoke up. What are you saying, Cyclops? Kakashi turned to her, but before he could answer, Yoshihiro spoke up for him. That someone wanted to make it look like they fought each other. Someone that wants the villagers to stay at each other's tea. The city was cold on this night, Itachi realized. Biting winds with chilling howls screeching through the empty streets and empty homes. Its former occupants, now deemed a hindrance by their leader, Pain. There was always silence before a battle, he knew. Some strange, freak act of nature, but there was always this hush before a fight. In the environment, in those around them. As if the sense of danger transcended to every aspect of the individual's lives, telling them to keep quiet. But this was oppressive, almost bordering on physically painful. He was no stranger to Mass M. He had, after all, killed his entire family in a single night, so his unease was not due to recent actions or trauma. He realized that it was due to anxiety. He was nervous. He couldn't even remember the last time he'd been nervous, the last time he'd ever felt as though he was truly in danger from an opponent. Not even when he stood before Pain himself for the first time, had he felt this way, even knowing he may have to take on the wielder of the Rinnegan alone if he deemed him unworthy. And yet here he was with other individuals that held enough strength, chakra and power within their being to destroy entire villages by themselves, each, in order to fight him. And he was still fearful, still nervous. The only experience he held with the so-called Devil King was years ago, just after he'd taken control of Konoha. He and Kisame had attempted to capture him then, and had failed. And though he knew that both he and Kisame had been forced to hold back due to the fact that they had wanted their presence to remain a secret, the fact that he could only have become stronger since then did not sit well with him. If at the age of 12, this boy was able to fight two S-class criminals to a withdrawal, just how much stronger was he now? How many of those rumors and stories and garbled, fear-induced accounts of his power were true? And how many were false? It was a terrible wrath indeed that held an entire country together through fear alone. And it was a wrath that he and his fellow Akatsuki members would soon be subject to. They were all strong, they all held their strengths and distinct abilities, each more than enough to defeat any one Jinchuriki they had previously fought against. But this was different, wasn't it? This was a Jinchuriki unlike the others. And he knew that in the end the question it came down to could be stated very simply. Were they strong enough to break the man whom had broken the world? We can rule out sooner, Gaara wouldn't have attacked his own sister. Then that just leaves Kumo. Toyohisa put in, watching as Kakashi paced and his uncle held a fist beneath his chin in silent contemplation. But how did Zhu Liang know his spy would be on the ship? I mean, we didn't even know. I'm not even sure anyone outside of Wave knew. Tayuya responded. Even I don't think this Liang guy could have a spy network that quick and sophisticated, especially with us actively looking for spies from Kumo. Could it have been someone inside of Konoha then? Yoshihiro put in. No, Kakashi said, shaking his head. Everyone in Konoha just wants to end the war. I don't think there's anyone who'd want to expedite it. Then she was acting independently. Toyohisa put in. From the accounts while she was staying at Sakai, many of the men felt that the Kunoichi Mika was unstable, insatiable and a love for battle. She could have simply wanted to expedite the fighting as long as possible. Kakashi shook his head again. She may have been crazy, but Mika was never stupid. Attacking Temari made her not only our enemy but Gaara's and by default Zhu Liang's as well. She wouldn't have put herself in the middle of everyone's wanted list. So you're thinking a third party altogether? Someone not in Konoha or involved with Kumo and Suna? Yoshihiro put forth. Yes, but who? Kakashi said, continuing his pacing. You guys made a lot of enemies over the years. Any groups you may have failed to put down completely? Yoshihiro questioned. Actually, Kakashi, now that he mentions it. Tayuya spoke. Don't you remember a few years ago, back when we were still subduing the central marshlands? We'd been receiving sporadic reports of some guys wearing red clouds. Kakashi nodded. Yes, Akatsuki. But those reports ended years ago. Why? Yay. The former Oto Kunoichi interrupted. They just ended. We didn't hunt down those missing nins, and they've all just fallen off the grid since. Pretty hard considering just who they were. So you think they've just been laying low this whole time? Kakashi responded. If so, then what's changed? Why act now? Tayuya's features soon became irritated. How the hell should I know? I'm just tossing S out there and that group just vanishing always seemed weird to me. Akatsuki. Yoshihiro med. That sounds familiar to me as well. Do you remember what they were, Toyohisa? The younger man shook his head. No, uncle. They had always been extremely elusive to our spy networks. If they are active now, Kakashi continued, then they can only have one reason to have manipulated Mika. They want us to keep fighting each other, to keep everything in chaos. To keep our eyes away from them. That means they're planning something big. How big are ya thinkin'? Yoshihiro said as he crossed his arms in front of himself. Real big. Something that may lead to the massive destabilization over both factions. They obviously have no love for Suna or Konoha. Maybe they're even planning to make an entirely new faction of their own. That's insane, Tayuya said with a shake of her head. Naruto-sama would stop them before they were finished even giving their opening speech. You know how brutal he is against uprisings. Kakashi's eyes widened for a moment before he rushed over to the map. Yoshihiro, where exactly was it that you all fought at sea? Show me on the map. The older Tsuchikage stepped forward, easily pointing out the coordinates. Right here. Kakashi blinked for a moment. If I recall correctly from my travels to Kiri, there's a very strong underwater current near those coordinates. If Naruto was caught in it, then he could have easily been washed to any of Kiri's small islands further east. Okay, and how does that help us? Yoshihiro stated with a shrug. All you've given us is a lead to Naruto's location, not any insight into this Akatsuki group's plans. If Akatsuki is as bold as I think they are, then they may just try to Naruto himself. As Tayuya said, if they hope to succeed in bringing in another faction, they'd have to fight and get rid of him before they could even hope to get started with any mode of success. Tayuya, from her place, scoffed, showing what she thought of the notion clearly. Good luck with that one. Stupid, I know, but you remember who was in that group when they were last active, right? Sasori of the Red Sands, Deodara from Iwa, Uchiha Itachi, Hoshikage Kisame. He emphasized the last two. If Kisame deduced Naruto's whereabouts as well, then they may try to reach him. Even he can't take on half a dozen S-class nuke nin on his own. You know that. We need to reach him first, and guard him once he makes landfall in Wave. Kakashi stated towards the redhead. Yoshihiro sighed in aggravation. Well, at least our bags are already packed. The statement brought Kakashi's single eye towards him. You're coming. Of course I'm coming. Think I'm gonna pass up a chance to fight S-class criminals? The Tsuchikage stated with a haughty air. Toyohisa, you're in charge of the men. Make sure they get back to Iwa safely. But uncle, the younger man began to protest, only for Yoshihiro to level him with that familiar chiding gaze. Toyohisa, he warned. Kakashi thought for a moment before turning to Tayuya. Tayuya, the same goes for you. You're in charge. Get the army back to Konoha. She nodded. All right. A smirk soon spread over her features, no doubt already cracking the proverbial whip over her teammates. I promise to get M back in one piece. The copy ninja nodded before turning to Yoshihiro. All right. I'll meet you at the eastern edge of the camp in an hour. The Tsuchikage nodded before smirking. Good to be working with you. Copycat. Kakashi's eyes narrowed, wondering just how sound it was to leave, alone with this, so-called ally. When Temari emerged from the cave near sundown, as she had taken to doing since she'd realized that, with its isolation, this place held one of the most beautiful sunsets she'd ever seen. It was one of the few pleasures she could derive from this place, seeing as how most of her days consisted of doing nothing, or helping take care of Hinata. She made towards her usual spot when she spotted none other than Naruto standing on the beach, the familiar red shroud of his cloak now flapping in the ocean breeze, his hood shadowing his features once again as he stood with his arms crossed in front of himself. Temari paused in her stride, the sands beneath her feet crunching softly as they shifted beneath her weight. Though she hadn't spoken or given any indication as to what she had heard him mutter in his sleep, the name he had released from his lips while he'd been unconscious, it was not as though she hadn't pondered over it. I mean, how the hell could she not? The man known throughout the world as a cold-hearted M, responsible for the genocide of thousands, said to be more monster and beast than man, had actually dreamt of someone. Of a woman no less. The possibilities ran rampant through her mind, every scenario from an enemy ninja, to a former teammate that had betrayed him to someone he had loved. That last one was particularly outrageous in her mind. Not only that any woman could fall in love with him, but especially, that he could love them back. Pointless speculation had succeeded in nothing but giving her a headache, and an overly taxed imagination. Standing there as he was now though, muscles coiled tight in barely restrained aggravation, she couldn't help but wonder if he really could care for someone. It was Hinata's condition that was the seeming cause for him being so high-strung. If he could care about her, it wasn't so unbelievable that he could care about someone else, right? Her legs carried her closer towards him, eroding the distance previously between them. He didn't move, he didn't look, merely stood there, completely still except for the movement of his cloak as it caught the wind. Why are you here? She opened her mouth, pausing awkwardly as she realized that she really had no answer for the query. No real reason to be here, other than, do you want to talk? She offered. Perhaps, if she got him to engage in conversation over this situation with Hinata, she could see if the man actually had something other than a cold slab for a substitute to his heart. What would I desire to converse about, Sabaku? He questioned blandly, not turning to speak to her, seemingly content to keep his eyes fixed on the horizon. More than accustomed to his dismissive, borderline rude manner on the best of days, the answer didn't faze her as she sat down, turning her eyes to mimic his own gaze out towards the sunset. Don't you want to talk about Hinata? She offered, shifting her eyes to glance upwards towards him. She is ill, and I do not have the medical knowledge to cease her deterioration. I do not see how our discussing it would change these facts. He stated calmly. No, but it'll help you. She stated calmly. This time he did turn to look at her, eyes glinting beneath the hood as his head turned to look over his shoulder. Help me. His tone was dangerous, and it made her muscles tense beneath her clothing. And why, he continued, still not turning to face her, would you want to do that? She swallowed, not turning away from him. She licked her lower lip rather nervously before shrugging. I don't know, guess, maybe you shouldn't be beating yourself up over the fact that you can't help someone you care about. She ventured carefully. Care. The word escaped his lips with a scoff. Why do you humans choose to relate such a useless emotion to so many situations that have nothing to do with one another? We humans? She questioned incredulously. What? You think you're not human? Do you regard me as human? He questioned calmly. Aren't you? She shot back. That doesn't answer my question. He replied calmly. Silence was her response, causing her to look away from him. Something akin to guilt lining her face. You do not hold me as one of your own. Why should I? The blonde male questioned rhetorically as he too looked away, returning his gaze to the horizon. Turning back to him, eyes narrowing, she spoke, voice a strange mixture of heat and compassion. A tone that reminded him far too much of Yoshino. She had always spoken in a similar way whenever she spoke to him. Then you're saying you don't care about anyone. Attachments are weaknesses in our world, Sabaku. I would think that a person of your rank and current predicament would realize this. If your brother was not so attached to you, then it would not be so easy for Liang to manipulate him as he does. My brother is not weak. Temari defended, anger now in her voice. The fact that you become angry will not change anything. Naruto replied calmly. He is still very much in the dark over Liang's role in your and your other siblings' injuries. And with no inclination to discern the truth simply because he is too blinded by a desire to gain you back from me. So you don't care about anybody. No one but yourself and this megalomaniac dream of yours to rule the world? She asked with easily discerned disbelief. Myself? He questioned, turning to face her over his shoulder again. No, foolish Sabaku, it is not for me that I do what I do. Now that caught her attention, eyes now wide and mouth slightly parted. Not for you. Then who are you doing it for? He didn't answer, standing like some red-shrouded monolith beneath the orange and brightly colored sky. Are you? She paused, contemplating the possible consequences of her next words if she chose to utter them. Are you doing this for Yoshino? He rounded on her so fast Temari couldn't react before he grasped the front of her shirt and hauled her to her feet, gasping in fright at the fury she saw behind those eyes. How do you know of her? He hissed, his tone laced with such venom it made the kanoiki tremble within her clothing. I speak. He roared, bringing her closer to his face, so that her nose was almost touching the dark metal of his mask. You said her name in your sleep. She said hurriedly, swallowing as she looked into his eyes. Gripped by some sensation, unable to look away. For his own part, Naruto himself was uncertain what he was feeling. Anger was there certainly, but its source was lost to him. No one knew of Yoshino. Those that had fought during that short campaign certainly speculated. But their speculations were worthless and in most cases, wordless. Answer meant nothing. For her to speak of her so directly, so bluntly. To be confronted with her, so directly, so bluntly, it was something that drove strong emotions through him, emotions in which he only knew how to express in a single way, anger. He scented no deception from her, and through her fear it was easy to read her regardless even if he could not detect such things. He released her, watching as she caught herself on unsteady legs, ironing out her shirt with her hands as she took a few steps back, away from him. She swallowed, eyes narrowing as she refused to allow this opportunity to pass her by. She repressed her fear, and ignored the part of her mind which screamed for her to simply let the subject given his previous reaction, as she spoke again. So you can feel something for someone. I did not. What? Didn't care about her. Sorry, but a reaction like that doesn't come from someone that doesn't care. She interrupted with some vehemence. Naruto's eyes narrowed beneath the veil of his hood, glaring down at the much shorter Kanoiki as she stared back up at him, the usual fire of her defiance stoked and now kindled into a rapidly growing inferno as she realized that she had caught him off balance. So who was she? A former teammate? A sensei? Some enemy Kanoiki? A traitor? Naruto remained silent, his slow, even breathing calm beneath his mask. He gave no answer, because there was no answer. She was all of those to him at some point in his life. After several seconds of his silence, Temari had to fight the urge to growl her impatience. This man was so insufferable. Everything in this emotionally experience had to revolve and end solely in conflict. In conflict. The thought struck Temari like an epiphany, blindsiding her from nowhere. Perhaps she could get answers from him using a different approach. He was used to fighting, verbally and physically. She wouldn't get anything out of him using those methods. Placing a soft expression over her features, the Kanoiki spoke again, her tone more pleading than aggressive, her body language more submissive than demanding. Was she special to you? It was a tactic he knew well, regardless of his ability to detect her deceit through his sharp sense of smell. Fool girl, he said, voice emerging from the mask like a growl. Do not think your false concern and falser empathy will garner you hidden knowledge over me. You will gain no leverage on this day. Temari blinked, her features soon becoming confused before becoming truly pitying. A similar expression to the one she had given him shortly before she as well. Is that the first thing that comes to your mind? That someone is going to take advantage of you. Do not claim it to be false Kanoiki. He hissed out the last word, as if reminding her just who and what she was. You seek knowledge to learn more of me. To learn of my possible weaknesses. My vulnerabilities. Temari lowered her eyes from him, expression now genuinely sad as far as he could detect. Is that how you feel about everyone around you? She questioned. Even with Hinata and your other ninja. To do otherwise would be to deserve death, Sabaku. You should know that. He answered. It must be such a miserable experience. To be so closed, so isolated, from everyone and everything. To feel as though you always had to have your guard up. To not have one person you could confide in. You could trust and feel safe with. Did she make you like this? Temari asked softly, eyes once again traveling upwards to look into his own, as he stood there, with arms crossed in front of his guarding himself. Those eyes of silver gray gripped him, made him pause as she seemingly tried to bore right through him with her gaze. As though her answers would come if she looked deep enough within the ice blue. Did she betray you after you'd given her your trust? Is that why you're like this now? Naruto straightened just a little bit more, allowing Temari to see that she'd hit very close to home in her guess. But there was no smug satisfaction. No feeling of accomplishment here. The fact that she may be the only living person with this knowledge gave her no rush. It only filled her with pity. As she looked at him now, standing there, he was no more than 3 feet away, but he was still alone. Even the physical distance between ourselves and the mainland seemed to pale in comparison to just how far apart he held himself, and was held, to the rest of humanity. You really did love her, didn't you? He remained silent, unmoving for several seconds, as if contemplating whether he should answer or not. Finally, he said, once again, you associate useless emotions to me, Sabaku. She is now, regardless. His eyes returned to the horizon after that, gaze narrowing. It appears Hinata may survive after all. Her eyes followed his, soon settling over a ship that approached this desolate place. Their rescuers. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.